Forest Service land and tribal land. They're mudding through wetland areas, botanically diverse areas that don't need that kind of activity, crossing into streams. And so mudding might be fun for some, but it's not a good thing. And we see a lot of those vehicles around here.
It's my understanding that the Umatilla Basin Watershed Council has been involved with the mudding arena out in Pilot Rock to give people a place to go to do that, so they're not going out into wild spaces.
And that's a great alternative.
Yes.
So you can still get that out of your system, but you're not destroying the environment.
Yep.
Because that is really hard to come back, especially in those high elevation wetland areas, swamps, seeps. Those just don't come back very quickly after something like that.
So how does the TMDL work with some of the other regulatory bodies that the tribe has? We have our Tribal Water Commission and our Tribal Water Code. Yeah, I know it's snowing, so we might cut this early so that people can go home. We'll probably talk a little bit more quickly, maybe skip the. Yeah, it's wonderful to see the snow. Water is also covered in our comprehensive plan in a number of places, and as well as by the Water Code. And I think there's a lot of repetition on here. But these images are from our 2020 flood. And like I had said in my climate adaptation presentation, while not trying to find joy in the suffering of others, it was an opportunity for the tribe to acquire property that maybe wasn't being used in the best way previously as like homes and infrastructure.
You know, has the tribe purchased the nursery at Riverside? Is that something?
I would love for them to.
Still for sale.
No, right? And it floods amazingly. Like, what if we put choke cherries down along the river?
So fun.
I have had my eye on that nursery since I moved to Pendleton.
Right.
And so climate impacts in the TMDL, one of the statements early on in the climate of the TMDL is that continual advancement of our understanding of hypergate exchange system includes climate impacts. So the climate adaptation plan is kind of the next step for us to think about how the TMDL will be in the future, knowing that our hydrology is going to change. And so the future is going to be different than the past. And so how do we move from using historical estimates to do our water planning to using climate projections to do the same thing? And here are just some photos of some of the climate impacts. So water regulation and tribal sovereignty. I had mentioned earlier that tribal sovereignty is everything when we talk about doing this work. Not only for justice reasons, but because tribes, federally recognized tribes, have these very specific mechanisms that can be used to force action that states, counties, municipalities do not have. And so tribes are critical in doing this work. So that is that treatment as state. It's tribal sovereignty in action. The work that Marty does, the work that Kate does, the work that our water resources program does, the work that Lindsay does, is essential for maintaining that treatment as state for this tribe. And so the monitoring and the data collection all go into that. But one thing, so I have this image up here, this is again from the 2020 flood, is because that flood, it damaged some of our monitoring infrastructure. And so if our monitoring infrastructure is damaged, we are not collecting data. We are losing continuity into our management strategies. And so not only are we trying to get ahead of climate impacts by anticipating them, we also need to plan for the fact that we might not be able to have that continuity of data, or plan for ways, again, adaptively, rather than set in stone. And so not only does this treatment as state, the water quality data affect the tribal regulation of water, but it affects the whole basin. This is a very collaborative effort, as Kate and Marty have said, that everybody shares their water data to create a fuller picture. And so data that the tribe is losing is data that we are all.
Before you go on, can I tell you what happened to that stream gauging station?
I would love it.
It survived the flood, right? But because the flood undermined some trees, we had a wind come through and it toppled a tree and crashed that station. So it survived the flood, but
It was
not the wind.
a few days after the main flood event, and the wind came through, and so that's Meacham Creek gauge.
And then the little cylinder to the right there, that's a sediment sampler that we have on display in the rotunda that some of you saw. That would be the field deployment of the ISCO.
Right. It's a metal shelter that protects the equipment. And actually, we've lost one of those down here at West Boundary when a tree in a windstorm just happened to fall right on the shelter and it demolished the shelter, but the equipment survived that one. So everybody lost equipment during that. And there's an expense and the lost data. So.
Exactly. So we're gonna get our hands on the water and then send you home because it is snowing. And so we're gonna go out and look at some water. Marty and Lindsay were very samples for us so we can see some differences in our watershed from, some of the ones that have maybe more turbidity in them, to some of those clearer ones. And so, you wouldn't mind following us out there. I'm gonna, Marty, we're gonna follow you.
Well, and I think some of us looked at that stuff during the break.
Sure. Would you mind doing it for the camera?
Oh, for the camera.
Likewise. You have a.
I don't yet.
I don't either.
Here, I can.
We've got connectivity, so we're gonna hopefully take you guys with us as we go. Oh, I need my camera on. We're gonna do some narration. You do both really
It's
quickly?
really dark in here
It is,
too.
I
I don't
know.
know.
How to fix
So, Colleen wanted us to collect a couple water samples so people could see if they weren't really familiar. We collected some water from up at Umatilla River at East Boundary site, east boundary of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. I should make that clear. And you can see it's pretty clear. So we're out there, and even though the water levels aren't really as high as I'd like to see them at this time of year, it's super clear. You could see right down to the bottom of the channel. It looks really good. This one was collected from Wild Horse Creek at the gauge, and that's at about River Mile 1 on some private property. And actually, it was pretty clear, but this is very typical of what we see in Wild Horse. It's noticeably darker. You can't see down to the bottom of the channel, and that's a lot more turbid than what we're seeing in a good system. Oh, excuse me. And then we've got Kate that's got a groundwater model simulator, which is a really great way to look at that.
I'm just cleaning up.
Oh, that's okay. And we've got the water sampler. So we've also got just our equipment. We're rushing a little bit because it is snowing outside. And so we're trying to send folks home before we get a little
Just
too
got an
inundated.
example of some of the equipment we're using for groundwater and surface water monitoring. Oh, I see we've taken some of it. We're now using YSI brand EXO sondes, multi-parameter sondes that this one has 4 sensors: dissolved oxygen, pH, turbidity, and conductivity and temperature. We've got a variety of different kinds of samplers, but the one we're using at the hatchery is the old high-tech bucket and rope
Excellent.
sampler.
Love that.
And just some examples of different sample bottles for those folks that hadn't seen that before.
So here are the sample
I
bottles.
think the other stuff has gone
Um,
back into boxes.
yeah, and so
Oh, yeah, we were talking earlier at the break. Our temperature loggers, we're moving towards these Bluetooth. Right now, we're using all Onset brand loggers, and we use these for both air and water. But this model is one of the Bluetooth devices, and it's really nice out in the field. You use a smartphone or a handheld device, something like that. It's really slick, it's easy, and I like it.
that's good because when I was working for the Watershed Council, you had to plug it into that thing and that
Right,
thing would
we had
not
numbers
recognize
like
anything.
this, and these shuttles get a little.
Yeah,
weird.
it was
Yeah.
difficult.
So. That's.
Yeah, I think
This.
yeah, what
So
is
we
this?
went up and pulled this sonde. I don't have any in the lab right now. Oh, am I holding
Yes,
this?
the microphone.
And so this is just an example of a deployment tube that that I made years ago when we put the first sond out at the Umatilla River at East Boundary Site. Wanted something that provided a little bit more protection. Can you hold that? Than what these devices have. They've got these really fragile sensors, but there is a guard. This is plastic. We get a lot of substrate movement in the Umatilla River. And so looking at some other examples online from USGS, I had this fabricated by PGG Welding Shop, if you guys remember that.
Yeah.
Holes are made in there so the water can flow through, but I can lock the cap with a padlock, so it provides security, but protection from substrate also. It's heavy, so you also have an advantage, a little bit of a weight problem, but we actually lost one of these during the flood up at South Fork Walla Walla
Wow.
by the hatchery, but then I had one at Harris Park and the sond was in it. It was half buried, but it survived. So, yeah. So that was just that's what that was. Thanks for asking. So that's what we've got.
No, I think that's great. And
Yeah.
we're going to wrap up.
Yep, sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're going to close out our live feed. Thank you so much for joining us, those of you who stayed with us. And I'm excited to have this recording available for folks that weren't able to be here. And so we're so grateful to everybody who's here in person and online. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to seeing you next month. Have a safe rest of your week and talk with you soon. All right. Bye-bye.